we will go to question number 2. Let me bring that up here somewhere. All right. This is an anonymous question. We're supposed to trust God with all our hearts. What does it look like to trust God with the free will decisions of others, like our adult children? So glad to have you back. That's a hugely challenging issue, mostly because of how much our hearts are in turmoil over these types of things. So let me try to point towards some answers on this type of question, and I hope that you find some benefit in it. So one of the things I want to recognize is that trusting God with my heart, I don't know how we interact or how we layer that over trusting God with the free will decisions of others, because it almost acts as though, when we put it that way, it almost acts as though it's God that is actually causing the free will decisions of our children on whether they'll receive Christ or not, or maybe whether they'll do something hazardous or dangerous or cruel or evil. Right? I'm trusting God with their decision. That's giving God responsibility for their decision in a sense, and I don't do that. I'm not in that camp of believers who would kind of have that divine determinism where God sort of is causing everything to some degree. I don't want to get into that big debate, but because there's the compatibilist and all this other stuff. But moving on, I'm just not in that camp. So I don't have to trust God like, Lord, I trust that it was good that they made that bad decision, or that I'm happy that they made that. Obviously, that's not the kind of thing of trusting God. So where do I trust God with other people's bad decisions? Well, I trust in a few ways that come to my mind, at least, and I hope you find some benefit in this. One way I trust is knowing that God will ultimately use it for good. Not that it was good, but God will use it for good. And there's a huge difference between those two things, a world of difference. Right? Judas betraying Jesus wasn't good, but God used it for good. Pilate condemning Jesus wasn't good, but God used it for good. There's horrible things that happen, and I take some comfort in knowing that God will at least utilize this as part of his overall plan for mankind and for different people. He'll bring some measure of good out of it. It doesn't make the thing good, and I'm not suggesting that whatever good God brings out of it outweighs the evil. I'm not making those kind of judgments. I'm just saying at least God's doing something in the midst of this horrible thing. Another way in which I trust God is, and this is probably the more challenging part, trusting that if the people I love make decisions that bring them before God's judgment seat to be punished, to be condemned, that God was in fact right when he condemned them. And this can be really challenging because I love these people, and so my heart goes out to them. And we sort of start picking sides. But I remember people in school. There were some people that were just like, you guys know what I'm talking about. They were just real jerks. Like, they're really horrible individuals, but they were funny, or there was something about them that was likable, but they were character-wise, they were just like a horrible individual. And then there were individuals who would be like, yeah, I don't like that person because of their character. I have a problem with their character. Others would be like, well, but they're funny or whatever, so I don't care. And they would overlook the character issues because they had a personal like of that individual. I'm not saying this is what goes on with your children, but there is a parallel that has some connection. That is, I have a deep personal love for this person. And so I just want them to come out on top no matter what they do wrong, no matter what they say, no matter how bad their character is. I just want them to come out on top. That can sometimes be a wonderful quality as a parent, but it can also conflict with goodness itself and holiness itself. And this is where you trust that God, you don't have to be the judge. You don't have to make the judgments on your children. You can still root for them and pray for them and hope for them and all this, but you can trust that God will make the proper judgment. He loves them more than you. He wants to see them saved, but that want to see them saved isn't the same as just overlooking their own decisions to perhaps reject the gospel of Christ, blaspheme the Holy Spirit even. Rather, God is not only loving them, but he's also the proper judge. He'll have perfect love and perfect judgment. You don't have to have perfect love and judgment towards your kids, but you do need to have trust in your heart that when God takes over as judge, he will do the right thing and you will just trust him. I don't know if, you can't solve problems of grieving parents over the horrible decisions of their kids. Like there's no problem to solve here. It's just a horrible situation. But I hope that these words give you at least some insight, some way of looking at it in a way that lets you trust God more in this area. I really hope it does.